The sound arrives before the reason for it. Not a siren, those come later, but an anima grown deep under the floorboards, a tired hillside moving in its sleep. A sentence the earth has been rehearsing and finally says aloud. In Papua New Guinea, Senga province, midnight has not finished with the village of Yambali. When the slope lets go. Timber ebbs. Exhale. A roof lurches. The ground peels itself downhill in a thick, slow wave that carries houses like boats and gardens like offerings. In the first seconds, there is no light to see by. There is touch hands finding arms, feet finding thresholds that have become moving water. Then the sky spits a few stars through torn cloud and reveals an old hill learning to become a river. Neighbors arrive before authorities, because that is the first law. Barefoot men swing shovels that look small in the moonlight. A woman in a red wool hat ties a rope around her waist and crawls toward a voice no one else hears. The smell is clay and sap and something metallic. By the time the first pickup climbs the ridge with its high beams like reassurance, the village has invented triage and doctrine and the habit of counting everyone out loud. South across the planet, Porto Alegre's river has been writing a different letter all week. Rain makes a hymn on the sheet metal roofs, and the Guiba rises with the unstoppable courtesy of a guest who refuses to be turned away. Children stand on balconies holding plastic buckets because it feels like participation. Their mothers pack documents into zipper bags and move the couch onto chairs because it feels like control. In the darkness, green lights blink on the fireboats at the docks. And in neighborhoods already ankle-deep, the night fills with the sound of small motors neighbors' John boats repurposed as ambulances. The air tastes like lake and petrol and wet cardboard. 1,000 kilometers is a short distance now. The first radio call in the provincial disaster office in Wabag stacks itself on top of the alert that just pinged in Brasilia and the one that has been blinking all night on a screen in Geneva. Duty officers sit up straighter. Maps filled with color. A message goes out from the United Nations resident coordinator's phone that might as well be a bell. We are convening. There is a choreography to this. Clusters spin up like gears: shelter, wash, health, logistics, protection. Acronyms find their chairs. The first meeting will have coffee that tastes like tin and urgency, a whiteboard that cannot contain the names, and a single question scratched into a corner. Who needs what, where, when, and how do we know? On a desk in Port Moresby, an INSA. Contact list opens the international search and rescue families who can be airborne before the dust decides to settle. In a hangar in Townsville, a crew inspects a helicopter that has moved people out of storms for 20 years. In Port of Spain, a warehouse manager at the World Food Program keys in a release. High-energy biscuits, tarpaulins, rope, buckets, a water tank you can assemble without instructions if you had to. In Nairobi, a UNICEF cold chain specialist double-checks the numbers. How many vaccine fridges have backup? How many generators will drink more diesel than the city can afford to feed them? Across the river from a broken dam in North Africa, an old grief stirs. Someone says Derna out loud, but softly, the way you do when the lesson was expensive. Aid begins with data, as often as it begins with boxers. Satellites, blink awake. Copernicus, UNOSAT. They stitch together new maps from old ones and draw a bright edge polygon around the part of Enga, now buried in its past. Volunteers thousands of miles away trace roads and rooftops in open their coffee cooling beside their keyboards, each line a future coordinate for a truck that will arrive somewhere it has never been. Drones rise in gray morning like precise birds. Askan, where is the school? Where is the clinic? Where are the footpaths that survived? And if the road is a rumor now, can a helicopter land on the football field? Or is that also moving? At midnight plus 7 hours, a logistics officer named Paulo steps onto the runway in La Plata, where the Air Force has agreed to host an air bridge north. Into Brazil's flooded south, he draws an invisible grid in the air with 2 fingers as he talks to a ground crew foreman who has seen too many disasters to be impressed and not enough to be cynical. Pallets multiply like promises. Make the cargo mix honest, Polo says. 1 pallet that saves you, 1 that feeds you, 1 that keeps you dry. He taps a manifest and writes in pencil a word that has no glamour. Latrine, he underlines it, because dignity is infrastructure, and a queue without a light is not a mistake. it is a decision. In Yambali, the first survivor pulled out is a boy who will not let go of a rice scoop. Mud has made a soft helmet for him, and he blinks as if seeing is a skill he must remember. The volunteer who found him calls him little brother in Tokpazin, because that is how you speak to miracles. 4 hours later, an excavator's teeth bite into clay with a care that looks like slowness, until you see the operator's hands shaking. Somewhere under that red-brown is a woman whose husband swears he heard her call his name. The bucket moves, stops, moves again. The village holds its breath so hard that when the engine idles it sounds like relief singing. By midday in Porto Alegre, the school that will be a shelter for a week unlocks its doors. The head teacher turns the welcome back banner around so the letters face the wall. In the gym, lines on the floor decide where cots will go. A protection officer pins up a paper that reads in 3 languages. Complaint desk here. 2 teenagers drag a water cooler across the room, the way you move furniture. When you are not certain you can lift it, and then discover that you can. The smell of wet clothes and hand sanitizer take turns declaring themselves. Aid is often described as a tide, but when it works, it looks more like a braid. Local responders lead because they were born knowing the corners. They point to the only road that is still honest, to the uncle with a backhoe, and the cousin with a truck that can ford knee-deep, where others drown. National systems, flex civil defense, army logisticians, firefighters with ropes coiled on their shoulders like statements. International crews arrive, careful, sleeves rolled, helmets in hand, stepping into someone else's house with respect. Ms. F puts up a field clinic in a school parking lot. Who drops a disease early warning system into a place that does not want another acronym but knows the price of guessing wrong? The Red Cross and Red Crescent volunteers are already where they need to be because they are from there. Paolo walks from pallet to pallet, palm flat on shrink, counting out loud without meaning to. Fuel. Counting out loud without meaning. The generator at the municipal cold room grumbles. Insulin molecules have no patience. Measles waits in the wings and will take advantage if walls become porous and kids cluster unvaccinated in dark rooms. For too long, a UNICEF nurse named Tari, who has kept children alive in places where the wind uses knives, checks the data logger in the vaccine fridge and winks at the green light like it is a child behaving better than expected. She writes 4 degrees Celsius in a notebook that lives under her pillow when she sleeps. On the platform above a swollen river, a community leader in a blue cap explains to a prefect how a distribution will not turn into a crush. We call names first, she says. Women, elderly, families with infants, tend to rest. We don't toss boxers. We intend. She points at the men she has picked to control the line. They are loud in the right ways and silent in the right places. Polo hands her a clipboard because a system is often a person with a pen. By afternoon in Yambali, rain threatens. Clay sulks under the sky and shifts. A rumor comes that the road down valley has failed at a bend the locals call the elbow. The engineer frowns at his boots. We'll push the footpath, someone says, and 4 shoulders shrugged the word into fact. They tie ropes between the only trees that did not move and build a handrail out of nouns. Determination, stubbornness, repetition. A chainsaw starts in the distance, whines, then settles into a rhythm like the sound of a heart refusing to retire. The first helicopter rattles Enga's morning into a plan. Its belly holds rope, headlamps, a stretcher with a familiar look, and a medic who learned to find a pulse in Haiti, Nepal, Turkey, and at roadside accidents where no one had a camera. The pilot studies a landing zone that is both field and rumor. He knows the weight of rotors over mud can tip the world toward disaster again in a place like this. He floats the machine down like an apology. And still the river in Brazil rises a final set of centimeters nobody wanted to see. The convoy loaded at the airstrip tarp kits, oars, filters. The kind of biscuits the body agrees to even when the mouth refuses eases toward a bridge inked into the map in the 1960s. The driver leans forward as if that would lighten the axle load. Spray hits the windshield and clings. On the radio, a voice from the lead truck says a sentence that tries to be calm and cannot quite. There is a gap ahead. It might take us if we let it. The truck's engine idles. The decision grows heavy in the cab, and the river knocks once against the concrete like a neighbor, impatient. And the driver answers by putting the truck in gear. The convoy crawls forward with a politeness that feels like courage. Steel plates laid in the night by engineers with lamp headbands clank under tires. A man in the second truck starts to pray in the way people who rarely pray do. Words searching for a first home. The radio is all breathing. Then, over the gap, the traction holds. The last axle clears, and laughter cracks open like thunder. The barber in the fourth truck knocks the palm of his hand against the dashboard and says, "Next time we ask the river first." In Yambale, the excavator's arm hesitates above a pocket of earth. Someone swears, breathed. Operators learn to move dirt like surgeons. A human chain forms and slips into mud up to the thigh and then higher, weight shifting from boot to boot. People bargaining with gravity. Someone taps. Someone answers. A bundle comes up, light and terrible. Another follows, light and singing. The line of neighbors' hands, both along with the same reverence. A grandmother crosses herself, and then a second time out of habit. A child coughs, and the sound is ugly and perfect. Proof the air has not abandoned the room. By noon, the first cluster meeting ropes itself into order in a school classroom in Porto Ele. Maps and flip charts scab the yellow walls. The logistics clustered led by WFP. A fact the young logisticians report like a family tree lays out the deus lanes and bottlenecks in a simple four-color code. Shelter wants tops up before dusk so people will not choose wet sleep over no roof at all. Wash says 15 liters per person per day. Not a number, but a promise they intend to keep. Health has a measles alert framed like a favor. If you can, keep space between cots. Protection says lights in latrines now, not later, and whistles into the hands of women who ask for them. The AAP officer pins up a phone number that will go straight to a desk where a woman will answer. And if she cannot, she will write and then answer later. The local NGO leads sit where their voices can be heard. They have names for every corner of the city that do not exist on any official map. Everyone agrees on fuel. You either have it or you are a theater. The municipal cold room has a generator that drinks like a sailor. Tari twists the cap on a jerrycan that just crossed the Gapmate Bridge. The data logger winks green. She smiles at it the way a farmer smiles at a storm that misses his fields. Someone asks about insulin. Someone else whispers Kalara like a rumor you don't want to make true with volume. They mark out CTU Space Calera treatment units shape themselves in tents and chalk lines across asphalt. Intake, oars, corner IV poles. A corner where the floor is scrubbed so clean it smells like determination. Orders travel faster than trucks. Paulo stands on the tailgate and speaks into the megaphone he hates, with a neighbor's humility. Block leaders first, he says, and the Baba block leader by acclaim Kal's names born in this neighborhood. Syllables that have known the corners longer than any map. Pregnant women in the first lane, the elderly in the second, patients for the third. The first boxers pass from hand to hand, never tossed, always offered. No bags. A man asks, "Use the top," the woman in the blue cap says, and he does, and it works, because dignity is also ingenuity applied to plastic. Across an ocean, a second crisis threads into the first. The Caribbean has not cooled all winter. A storm finds its shape early, spiral perfect and intent. Meteorologists speak in numbers like poetry surface anomaly, potential intensity, rapid deepening, and nothing they say sounds like mercy. Forecast-based action teams move before the headline. The Red Cross in islands with long memories triggers their early action protocols. Cash transfers land in phones 2 days ahead of the first feeder band. Evacuation shelters open before the first palm bends. Boats are lashed high and inland, while the roads still have grip. The phrase "no regret spending" goes from a document to a voice on a bus. At dusk, we go now. We will be embarrassed to come back if it misses us. We will be alive if it does not. Back in Enga, the helicopter drops in again and again, washing down the hillside with rotor slap and grit. The medic kneels in the doorway, counting breath without looking at a watch. An army officer, who once thought his job was elsewhere, carries a stretcher as if he always did. The pilot floats the machine out under the lines with an economy of motion learned in another country's flood. The landing zone man, whose job is to wave orange sticks in the shape of a welcome, remembers his brother under a different hill years ago and waves like his arms are the only thing keeping the bird from hitting the earth. In Porto Alegre, the power goes off at the shelter just after someone says into a mic that it will hold. The generator stutters, recovers, stutters again. A boy appears with a plastic fuel can like a magician's handkerchief. In the band of volunteers, he belongs to Sibyl Defense, fishermen, delivery drivers who know the city. As Veins forms a line between the generator and the can and keeps the stutter to an anecdote instead of an obituary. The lights flicker back into honest glow. A baby returns to sleep. A woman sits down on a cot and stops moving for the first time all day. Her face says every verb at once. Fled, waited, received, breathed. Aid trips on itself when procedures are treated as scripture. Customs holds a pallet of water filters at a gate because a letter lacks a signature that belongs to a man who is a vet. Sana, the coordination lead from Oka, finds a deputy and folds his name into a sentence that suggests he will be the hero in the next sitrub. If the forms learn their shapes fast, he smiles without meaning to, calls a cousin at the department, and the barrier lifts. Access is often the art of reminders. Remember your better self, your better day, your mother's admiration. In the gym, the child-friendly space blooms out of crates. Crayons that smell like every childhood. Mats that remember other feet. A box of storybooks where rain and wolves always mean something else. An adolescent girl hovers at the edge and then steps in, and the facilitator, trained to read the edges of a room, hands her a roll of tape and a job. Make the schedule for tomorrow. Let it look like a calendar. She writes down hours with neat numbers, the future given a grid. Late afternoon, someone says security in the room stills. A rumor of theft has grown legs. The community watch to uncles, a former policeman. The barber's cousin walks the perimeter with torches like lighthouses in a small sea. They do not carry guns. This is not that kind of night, but they know faces and they say names before they ask questions, which is the difference between a confrontation and a conversation. A young man with too much energy tucked under his skin hovers by the gate. The barber looks him in the eye. Not above, not below. Tomorrow you help with a rope, he says, meaning the tarp kits, 8 corners, and something in the boy's jaw. Okay, he says, and means it. The second helicopter arrives at Yambali's makeshift landing zone with a sling load. Tense, brittle white like eggshell. A stack of a coil of hose, thick as a wrist. The wash engineer, who's been counting latrines in his head since dawn, points up valley. Springbox, he says, and 3 men nod. Like a secret has been remembered. A pipe that fed 10 houses before the slide can feed 100 if it finds the right slope, the right gravity, the right set of hands, at the right bend. A girl with mud to her knees watches him kneel beside the spring and speak to it as if it is shy. We will bring you to them, he says, to the water, as if promises are part of hydraulics. On the river in Brazil, the convoy noses into a barrio whose name people say with pride, and the city says with a steady, worried voice. The water has found the lower floors and made them honest. A refrigerator floats past like a whale, white and strange. The barber steps onto a desk turned sideways and speaks into the megaphone he hates. His voice has been raising money for funerals and customers for 20 years. It turns a loose crowd into a listening one. We will go in 4s, he says. Women first, then the old, then the families with children. 10. To rest. Do not make me call your mother. Laughter unhooks. Jaws, for people step forward, and then for more. Boxers pass hand to hand until the truck's bed empties to the metal. Then the forecast reaches the room. The storm that has been composing itself in the Caribbean has found the note it was looking for. In a string of coastal towns from St. George's to Kingston, the air grows bright and wrong. A councilwoman reads the message off her phone and translates it instantly into the language of feet and doors. Now, Keys. Go. Anticipatory action funds unlock like a race starting. Cash lands in hands with 2 days to spend it. The shelter schools, with doors that open outward. Churches with roofs that hold are already unlocking. The boats tie off, higher than last time. The radio in Palois' pocket hisses the island. Esnain, and the wind knocks. Once at the window like someone asking if you are awake. And everyone is. In the Caribbean, shutters slam like punctuation. Roofs flex and hold. Children press to the leeward side of rooms and learn the shapes of wind by ear. The eye comes like a lee blue polite, a pause that makes trouble by making hope. The father stands in the doorway and blocks it with his shoulder because arrogance always lives in the back wall of an eye. The second wall arrives harder and faster. Screwset had decided to be loyal, reconsider, and then remember themselves instead. In Porto Alegre. The breaking point is not wind, but crowd. Word runs ahead of the megaphone that cooking gas will be distributed over there and over. There becomes a knot of shoulders and hot breath and wet anger. The head teacher sees it happening and raises her hand like a conductor. And the barber sees her and lifts his megaphone and calls names the way you do when you have shaved the owners of those names for 15 years. Don't make me look for you, he adds. And there is a laugh like a small thunder in the rain. The knot becomes a line again, and Polo quietly moves 3 boxers to the other side of the yard to relieve the pressure. You learn to feel crowds in your ribs, to step before they do. Disease watches water like a hawk. 3 children show watery stools at the clinic tent, and Tari closes her eyes for exactly 1 breath and then moves faster. The CTU goes from plan to fact in an hour. Beds with plastic, buckets with lids, a whiteboard that says, in fat marker, ORS first. The wash team erects a hand-washing station with taps made of drilled holes and a plank. A heck perfect enough to earn applause if there were time. A rumor that dead bodies breed epidemics slinks along the fence line. A volunteer in a vest steps into its path and smothers it with science and kindness, because panic spreads faster than cholera if you feed it. Fuel plays roulette. The generator hiccups while the vaccine fridge hums a brave 4 degrees Celsius. A teenager, the one directed to the rope yesterday, appears with a yellow can like a joke and half a grin. The station at the edge of the flood was indeed open for friends if they ask properly. The fridge's green light steadies. Tari writes 4 degrees Celsius in her notebook again, this time with a little flourish that would be a heart if she believed in such things in ink. Access becomes a verb in Enga. The footpath skates across a slope that has not decided its loyalties. The wash engineer plants his heels and runs his hands along a pipe that was once a boundary between neighbor's garden and neighbor's. Now it is a spine. It will carry water to a village that forgot how to drink. He measures drop the secret that lets Gravy do most of the work using the tool he carries in his head and the one in his pocket. A boy with eyes like fresh river water watches, and when told to hold the pipe just so, he does. And a smile sneaks up his face when the water first sputters, then runs. In the ops room, the email everyone dreads arrives at 2:11. Adona has shifted funds to a crisis that looks better on television. Senna breathes in, out, and writes back something that feels like insolence and is merely true. Needs here have not moved. She copies the one woman in the capital who remembers Iset Goma in 100 places where the first cash arrived for weeks too late. And the woman reads the email, rubes her eyes and replies with a sentence that lands like a truck. 40% retained. Spend fast. Send pictures when you can. Send receipts always. The line between pity and policy holds for 1 more day. Rumor does not need rain. It breeds in heat too. In a corner of the shelter, a man whispers that the next distribution is only for those who gave their names to the party official. The AAP officer has learned to love drama when used properly. He writes the rumor in large letters on the complaint board. Under it, he writes, false. Under that, he writes, order is pregnant women, elderly, families with under 5s. Tend to rest. List here. He stands beside the board all afternoon, a witness with a pen, and the rumor runs out of breath. At the airstrip, a UNHAS. Chopper thumps in like a punctuation mark. The loadmaster slaps the side of the crate that is a cholera kit. the distilled practicality of other people's misery, packed by people who have no patience for tragedy as performance. Puller checks weights with his hands, because the scale is broken and his palms are good enough for government work. The pilot keeps one eye on the clouds and one on the taxiing line and holds a quiet conversation with both. The helicopter tips forward and leaves. And for a second, the field is silent. And this is what hope sounds like. In the Caribbean, the storm has finished its sentence and moved on, leaving roofs peeled, power lines like tired snakes, and air so clear it hurts. Anticipatory cash turns into rope and tarps and rice and paracetamol in kitchens, where women repack dignity into drawers alongside utensils. An old man stands at his doorway and says out loud that this is not the worst and not the best. And then he laughs, and his grandson laughs too, because laughter is a stair back to normal. Biking Porto Alegre, the river gives back 2 centimeters, then 3, and the shelter fills for the night with a different weight. People do not talk loudly. A girl with her hair in 2 tight braids draws a map of her neighborhood that has islands where there were intersections yesterday. She draws a new bridge, too, a line where the convoy went, and a small rectangle for the AAP desk that says in her spelling, complaints, answers, tomorrow. The head teacher watches her and thinks of math and science and civics, and decides they will teach all 3 in the morning. The ache that comes on day 3 in the bodies of responders is a kind of instruction. Sit, drink something, make a plan that includes sleeping, because there is tomorrow. Paulo stands in the door of the field hospital tent and lets his shoulders drop for 1 full count and watches Tari write. The night shift, S, names on the whiteboard. In a corner, a man prays, in a voice so soft it almost cannot be called voice. On the ridge above Yambali, a mother lies on her side and listens to her child breathe like the ocean. The pipe hums at him through the brackets. Someone bolted 2 old stone. Then a radio crackles with a kind of urgency that does not need language. The footpath above the elbow is gone. The slope moved again. The team that went up at dusk is at the bend where the rope is gone. The sky is the color of wet slate, and the first raindrops arrive fat and convinced, as if they have marching orders from somewhere higher. And the plan that lived in daylight must survive the dark. The hiking club woman ties a new rope with a fisherman's knot that will not admit failure. The wash engineer wedges a stick under a section of pipe with the gentleness of someone putting a sleeping child into a bed. Headlamps flicker like insects. They step, slide, catch themselves. Step again. The slope gives and then remembers it is supposed to hold, and for tonight it obeys. In the village, the first cups fill, and a grandmother washes her face slowly as if the act itself could restore names to the people she has already promised to remember. On the Caribbean coast, the early warning siren falls silent, but everywhere else the radios explode into work. The anticipatory action checklist becomes past tense. In shelters built on mounds exactly high enough to claim their safety, women re-roll cash in elastic bands and tuck it inside shirts. A generator coughs and settles into a purr. That'll mean insulin lives through the night again. A mayor who was once a weather skeptic becomes a convert by desire and stands at a podium and says, "We bought the rope before we felt the wind." The town applauds the sentence. Then the choice. In Porto Alegre, the logistics cluster cancels the 3rd convoy and then uncancels it, weaving decisions through hourly river gauge updates. The bridge with the steel plates has a new gap where the river took a bite. Engineers argue in centimeters. A ferry that usually lives 2 hours inland appears, driven by a man who doesn't wear a watch. "She can carry 2 trucks, he says, patting the hull like it's a horse, and Paulo changes his map inside his head. In the gym, the shelter's order begins to feel like a culture. The breastfeeding corner smells like milk and soap and the sweet breath of sleeping babies. The latrine lights shine all night, and the teenage girls tasked with checking the locks find 3 that stick and fix them with a pencil and a joke. The child-friendly space posts a new schedule written in the tidy hand of the adolescent it claims. There's a slot for homework, and a slot for drawing, and a slot for running that reads run a lot. The AAP desk posts yesterday's complaints and today's answers. Lights fixed. Queue changed. Cook stove time extended. Someone has drawn a smiley face beside the last one. Someone else has added eyebrows. In Enga, the army truck that couldn't find first gear yesterday climbs the ridge like an apology. The sling arrives with tents and blankets, and the health post opens under an awning that knows wind. An MSF doctor, freckled, older than he looks, lays out gauze and suture and lidocaine with the concentration of a man who has assembled hope from spare parts in 4 languages. He listens to a chest that says pneumonia and to a cough that says dust. He gives a woman a packet of antibiotics and then gives her the second thing she needs more: time, while he explains. She nods, a student again, and checks the label twice. Sana negotiates a corridor with a commander who wears his rifle like jewelry. 2 hours, he says. 3, she counters, pouring tea. 2.5, he offers like a discount at a bazaar. She smiles. And you will not take a photograph beside our logo, she adds. And he laughs. And for a second you can see the man who might have run a garage or a shop or a tour boat if the world had been fairer. The barrier lifts. 2.5 hours becomes 3 because the men at the checkpoint decide to impress each other with their reasonableness. The cold chain holds under choreography. Tari teaches a young volunteer how to read a data logger, like a pulse. 4 degrees is a lullaby. 8 is a warning. 10 is a siren. They rotate ice packs like a dance the rhythm kept with a marker on a box. And the demands of a line outside the curtain where a nurse says, next, in the voice of someone who wants to live in a better world and is building it by noon. The Education in Emergencies lead sets up a tent. There will be a school until the other school stops being a shelter. Pencils are counted like currency. The head teacher releases a sigh she did not know she was holding as soon as the first chalk squeaks on the board. The lesson is math and memory. How many liters per person per day? How many steps to high ground? How many names to call before the end of the session? Children raise their hands as if their arms are flags. Anticipatory funds switch green again in South Asia. River basins blinking red on a dashboard that has become an altar. Cash transfers land in flooded Afghan provinces where rain forgot to be polite. Women buy rope and tarps and dry food. Yes, they also buy phone credit, because information is as heavy as rice in a flood. Warnings ride on community radios and mosque loudspeakers. Voices old and trusted. A no-regrets distribution sends out boats to pick up the people who will resist. An imam steps into a doorway and says, God gave us legs to use before water uses its own. And men who would argue with officials nod at that and lift their mothers onto benches that are boats today. As night makes the gym a pool of light in a drowned city, the AAP officer draws a line down the center of his complaint book and labels one side rumors and the other answers. Under rumors, aid stolen. Answer. Tracked by block leaders. See list. Rumor. Only people from that party receive cash. Answer. Criterion wall, not negotiable. Rumor. Cholera comes from the dead. Answer. No. Wash your hands. Drink only treated water. Come to CTU. If diarrhea. He prints this last in letters, big enough for his own fear to read and be reassured. Then the forecast on Palo S. Screen thickens. A line of rain pivoting toward the very valley where the ferry is now the plan. His radio coughs. Wind increasing, the pilot says. Your window is 4 hours. He looks at his map, the physics of time and distance, and turns to the ferry captain who cracks his knuckles like he is preparing to play the piano. 4 hours is plenty, the man says, which could be true or bravado. Either way, the trucks are already reversing toward the ramp, and the river which pretends indifference lifts a little, as if it, too, wants to see how this will turn out. The ferry lunges and accepts its load like an old horse tolerating a new rider. The trucks settle, the river nods, and the ferryman puts his shoulder into the throttle like a man pushing open a stubborn door. The gap where the bridge used to be opens its mouth. The ferry does not ask for permission. It crosses. Rain needles faces and then slants away. The wind executes a sharp turn and changes its mind. On the far bank, men and women who have been waiting all day to be useful become useful in an instant. Ropes thrown, hands reaching, the old choreography, ancient and right. At the shelter, dawn arrives and decides to linger. The crowd is smaller at the water point because homes now have full containers. The CTU posts its counts on a whiteboard, a habit that makes the invisible curve visible end. The line does not climb today. Tari lets herself sit, then stand, then sit again, then stays standing out of stubborn hope. The vaccine fridge beeps its small ascent. A mother comes to the breastfeeding corner and falls asleep without meaning to. Another mother covers her with a blanket without comment. In Jambale, the pipe sinks through its brackets and brings cold to cups. The excavator parks and its engine dies. With a sigh that would be human if it could, the health post tent smells like betadine and eucalyptus and something else that feels like a plan. The child who coughed mud 2 days ago cries when the dressings are changed, then eats a biscuit with concentration, then sleeps with the entire weight of her small body on her mother's forearm. Outside, the wash engineer draws with a stick in the mud. Drop and run, culverts and catch pits. A little cartoon of a roof with guttering and a barrel with a lid. We make the mountain rest, he says to the teen who holds the pipe without prompting now, and the boy nods like a man. The island's anticipatory cash has done something new on purpose. The old market opens with prices that have not tripled, because the local council posted them on a board and a whisper network turned into a chorus. Roofs are lashed in neat crosses. Tarps pulled tight like drumheads. A mayor who had made jokes about climate ends. A press conference with a sentence that makes him look into the camera properly. The next storm will not find us surprised. Not again. He looks older and better for saying it. The convoy returns from the far bank at noon with empty beds and mud tattoos. The barber claps the ferry captain on the shoulder and says, "The only thing that makes sense." Again. The captain nods. The river pretends not to smile. In the ops room, Sana writes the sit-rep she wanted to write when the night was all static. Bridging capacity established. WISH indicators at sphere minimum. C2 admissions stable. Cold chain maintained. 2 schools reopened for double shift learning. Cash dispersed to 500 households. No major protection incidents reported. Complaint desk logs and feedback loop functioning. It feels like a poem because it is a list of ways a community refused to be only what happened to it. Exit is not abandonment. It is the handover you promised on day 1. The shelter cluster puts away its first tense verbs and writes in the future with locals. Block leaders manage roofing upgrades. Municipal vouchers valid at 3 vendors. The wash team signs the spring box over to a committee that has already elected its treasurer in a corner of the gym beside the child-friendly space. Health moves cold chain inventory from the big tent to a refurbished room at the clinic that now has a solar panel on its roof and a battery that looks like a suitcase. Protection leaves the whistles and the lights and a thing harder to leave. The habit of closing the latrine door and flipping the switch without thinking. The core humanitarian standard, usually a poster on a wall no one reads, appears in practice instead. Communities decide, information is shared, complaints are invited and answered, staff learn, mistakes are admitted and not repeated. Localization. Another word tired of speeches means contracts in local language. Risks shared, not unequally pushed downhill. The grand bargain, hammered together in Geneva and New York, shows up as a grandmother at the market paying a fair price for oil because donors paid overhead instead of pretending logistics is charity. There's still bad days. A truck rolls a tire into a ditch and stays there overnight. A child falls, and a scar is the record of the place where the floor was not there when it should have been. A rumor takes longer than it deserves to die. Derna still reads names into wind. Libya's river keeps its own council. Sudan's families count arms with MUAC tapes, green, yellow, red, and hope leans toward green because corridors opened at the right hour. Gaza's convoys weave lives through a geometry of checkpoints and consent, and children in tents make paper cranes out of distribution slips like Mercy learned origami. But this story is not tragedy's court stenography. It is a record of how, after the calamity, the second tide came in. Hands, trucks, pallets, clean water, soap, a light above a latrine, a rope threaded through a tarp's 8 holes. A pharmacist lowering his price, a hair because he saw another do it. A teacher insisting on a morning lesson. A nurse writing 4 degrees Celsius in a notebook. A barber becoming a logistics chief with a megaphone he will still hate when this is over. A commander who lifted a barrier. A ferry captain who believed 4 hours was enough. And made it so. Weeks later, the school smells like chalk and not people. The welcome back banner faces outward again. The head teacher taps the corner where a tiny black scuff remains on the gym floor and says nothing about the night it meant a family S-bed. Children learn what culvert means, and why floors must be high, and doors must swing outward. They practice a drill that feels like a game until the day it won't. The complaint desk becomes a suggestion box at council hall. The barber returns to faded necklines, and boys who want lines shaved into their hair. And sometimes he starts to say, in the flood, and stops. And sometimes he continues, and both are right. In Enga, the hillside greens over Scar. The spring runs clear into a concrete box, with a lid and a lock someone keeps a key for in a small pocket sewn inside a billum. The pipe has a slope whispered into it by men who are proud of that whisper, and boys who will teach it to children of their own. The health post becomes a room again, and not an emergency. A woman stands with her hand on the door frame and counts to 24, no reason other than the habit that saved her once, and the fact that it still calms her to make a minute behave. Aid does not make heroes. It makes neighbors more powerful. It is scaffolding, not a facade. It holds while the walls are built, and then it comes down. It is procedures disciplined by mercy. It is early money, not late boxers. It is maps that refuse to lie and radios that tell on the weather. It is the decision to keep lights on in the places where darkness has always been cheaper. It is the choice to ask, who decides, and then to live with the answer even when it slows you down. The disaster season is no longer a season. It is a calendar. Oceans are warm, too long, and sky holds more water than it used to and drops it where it drains. Remember another century. Earth shakes in places that did not retrofit enough, or at all. Conflict walks through markets and makes men at gates powerful, who should have been car mechanics. Humanitarian aid will not fix the shape of the planet or the old angers of men, but it can do this. Vitere fast, vitere true, be there humbly, and then not be there anymore, because the people most affected have the tools and the budgets and the keys. When the next call comes and it is already riding a satellite arc toward a desk where someone is washing a cup and looking at the sky, we will go again. We will carry with us the ferry captain's certainty, and the barber's voice and the head teacher's list and Tari S notebook with its tidy 4CS, and the wash engineer S, chalk lines and Sana, SD, and the hiking club woman S not, and the boy with the yellow jerrycan and the grandmother washing her face with new water. We will carry the lesson carved into every convoy bumper and distribution board and classroom wall. After the calamity, the answer is us, arranged on purpose. If stories like this move you, subscribe for more true events that change the world.